So what exactly is Yule or the winter solstice? Yule is the pagan Sabbath that celebrates the middle of winter on the shortest day of the year when the sun is at its lowest and the daylight hours are at their least. It is the mirror image to the other solstice of the year, the summer solstice. As you can see on the wheel of the year, the summer solstice was the longest day of the year, so we've gone from the longest day of the year to the shortest day of the year. On both of these solstice points there is this pagan mythology of the Holly King and the Oak King. The Holly King represents the winter and the dark and the cold, and the Oak King represents the summer and the light. And on both of these solstice days, the summer solstice and the winter solstice, these two divine masculine archetypes of nature would battle it out, and on the summer solstice the Oak King would lose, and on the winter solstice the Holly King would lose. So from that point henceforth it would become lighter as the Oak King representing the summer grows in strength and power until their next battle on the next solstice. So the winter solstice, although it is representing the shortest, darkest day of the year, it also has that element of hope to it, because we know that this is the last day where it will be so dark and so cold, and we know that it is only up from here because the Oak King obviously beats the Holly King at this battle on the winter solstice. So in a lot of ways the sun, which is so weak at this point, kind of goes through a final death and in a sense a rebirth at the winter solstice moment. And this is where the Christian symbolism comes in. So in traditional pagan thought we would think of the sun, S-U-N, having its rebirth at this time of year, and Christians just remove one letter and turn it into S-O-N, meaning son of the Father God. And there is this point at midwinter where the sun is at its lowest for 3 days, one on the winter solstice and then one each day either side of that, and that correlates to the Christian story of Jesus Christ being dead in the tomb for 3 days before he is reborn in a way and rises from the dead. So whilst the sun is having its rebirth at this point, and that is a rebirth of physical light, Christians believe that now is a time when Christ is having his rebirth at this point as well, and that is a renewal of spiritual light into the world. And so it's not really difficult to see how Christians reach this point of making Yule or the winter solstice the main celebration of their faith, rightly or wrongly detracting from the original pagan perspective of this holiday period. Yule is typically celebrated on or around the 21st of December, and whilst our last Sabbath of Samhain was all about the final harvest point as we gather in the last of our preserves that would sustain us through the winter, Yule would be when we allow ourselves to actually eat into those preserves a little bit and cheer ourselves up at the darkest point of the winter. And this is very much why feasting is such a huge part of traditional Yule celebrations, and indeed Christmas, lasting on to this day. Yule falls right on the cusp of the zodiac signs of Sagittarius and Capricorn, where Sagittarius ends and Capricorn begins, and interestingly, most of our folk tales around this character of Santa Claus centre around the transition astrologically between these two modes of being, the mentality of Sagittarius, if you will, and the mentality of Capricorn. So for instance, when Santa flies over the world to deliver all of his presents, he is very much a representation of the outgoing Sagittarius, who is constantly on the quest for exploration and travel mentally and physically to find the ultimate truth and bigger picture of things so that they can see a bird's eye view, or in this case Santa's eye view, of the world and of everything going on around them. This is contrasted a lot by Santa's next point in his journey, where he has to climb into all of these tight little chimneys to deliver presents into their individual homes for people. This represents him entering the sign of Capricorn, which is, rather than very expansive and open like Sagittarius is, it becomes a bit more restrictive and reeled in and controlled. So as Santa goes down the chimneys, he is concentrating and directing his energy in a very sharp and focused way, and that is how he actually is able to attain those goals of delivering presents to everyone in the world. So remembering what the Sabbath of Yule means and all of the folk tales around it is by looking at the zodiac signs that also fall on this place in the wheel of the year. And so you can check out my last video on the sign of Sagittarius for more information about that, and you can also subscribe to see my next video on Capricorn when that comes out, because honestly looking at those two zodiac sign videos will really help to deepen your understanding of Yule as a whole and just this general period on the wheel of the year as well. So in terms of ways to celebrate Yule as the pagan, if you're stuck for ideas, one idea is obviously, of course, to bring in the traditional evergreen pine tree. In ancient times it was thought that the nature spirits would be getting quite cold and sad out there in the dark at this time of year, and so we bring them inside to give them that kind of warmth and protection, and to protect the spirits of the tree, or even the fairies if you will. And that is why to this day we most often wrap fairy lights around trees because that is really representing these tree spirits that we brought in from the outside, from the cold and the dark, to give them safety within our home. The baubles that we hang on these trees represents fruit such as apples or oranges, and generally just the promise of the life to come. So obviously if you have some kind of Christmas tree or Yule tree, it can be really a fun activity to do, to decorate and to reflect on the origins of the tree and how we would bring these trees in from nature as a way of kind of protecting the nature spirits from the cold and dark, and also to give ourselves as people hope as well, because the traditional Yule or Christmas trees are always evergreen trees. They always have green leaves, and evergreens are plants that essentially never lose their leaves in the autumn, and they're always just as green in winter as they are in the summer. And this gives us all hope of the promise that life will return, and there is that everlasting light and hope within us, as symbolised by the evergreenness of these trees that we are reflecting on at this time of year. Another way to celebrate, as I mentioned earlier, is definitely feasting. It is of course a great way to celebrate, to bring people together and lift everyone's spirits, as community is so important, especially at this time of year when all of the dark and cold, the shortest day of the year, can leave us feeling a little bit depressed. If you are celebrating alone this year due to COVID restrictions perhaps, you can actually just prepare a feast for yourself, and also maybe even set the table for a few of your ancestors, as this is a practice that would have been traditionally performed by our ancestors in the past. The tradition of feasting on Yule or the winter solstice is so ancient, and if you set out a table for yourself and your ancestors, I'm sure they would be very grateful to partake in it with you in spirit, as it were. This could run on nicely from the communing with the ancestors that you would have done in the last Sabbat of Samhain, which I did talk about in a previous video. Another great way to celebrate Yule or the winter solstice is basically just reflect on the promise of the light and life to come. Once Yule hits, we will be over the darkest days, finally, so we can give ourselves permission to be a little bit more optimistic and hopeful about the year ahead of us and what awaits us. We can even perform a nice little activity that connects us to these different Sagittarius and Capricorn energies. The first practice being to make a gratitude list of all the things that you are grateful for what happened in 2020. I know that obviously it was quite a bad year for a large number of people, but if we make this gratitude list, we are tuning into the optimistic nature of Sagittarius, and we are able to just make a gratitude list, which is an excellent practice to have anyway. And if this year was challenging, you can reflect on how proud you are of yourself that you overcame those challenges and that you are still here today to tell the story of it. And then, of course, once you've made that gratitude list, you can make a second list of all the plans that you have for the year ahead of 2021. And this is where we tune more into the Capricorn energy of planning, organisation, and having a clear goal to achieve and a strong, steady determination to reach it. I think a lot of people do make a gratitude list for the past year as well as a plan for the new year going forward. We often have New Year's resolutions, of course. This is a practice that I think a lot of people do anyway, but I think it could be extra nice to do this practice and just reflect on how it links to the signs of Sagittarius and Capricorn, specifically of that gratitude and abundance and fiery cheerfulness that the Sagittarians represent. Again, you can check out my last video for more information on that, combined with the careful planning and more disciplined, but not depressing, just hopeful disciplined aspect of the Capricorns, sign of which we are now entering into, and that will probably be my next video that I release as well. There are so many other ways to celebrate Yule, of course, from gift giving and receiving to singing, which is another great way to just lift the spirits. A lot of people sing Christian Christmas carols, but there are also some good pagan carols out there, I think. I hope that in this video I was able to successfully cover the main themes of the Sabbat, and how you choose to celebrate is really an individual thing that is unique to you, and as long as your celebration plans for Yule this year match up and align with the themes of the Sabbat and the themes that call to you the most about the Sabbat of Yule, then that is the right way to celebrate it. So leave a comment down below, please. I would be so interested to hear about how you'll be celebrating the winter solstice or Yule this year. I hope you have a wonderful, magical time, and blessed be to everyone. Take care.